Welcome to Healing from Within. I'm your host, Tony Valen. You can contact me, Tony at TonyValen.com, or visit our website, healingfromwithin.net. Follow the show on Twitter at TVHFW. The show is also available on iTunes and YouTube. Just search Healing from Within with Tony Valen or look for the Tony Valen channel on YouTube. Joining us on today's show is Chris-Anne. Chris-Anne is a psychic medium, Reiki Master, teacher, and artist. You can learn more about Chris-Anne by going to creationsbychrisanne.E as in Edward, T as in Tom, S as in Sam, Y as in Yankee, ETSY.com. Like Chris-Anne on Facebook, search Elemental Energies with Chris-Anne. Follow Chris-Anne on Twitter at Chris-Anne1234. Chris-Anne, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and get started with the first question I always ask. What are your gifts and how did your journey begin?
Sure. Well, I am a psychic, and I am a psychic who does readings in the Akashic Records, which means I can look at your soul's history and what had happened in a past life and how it correlates to what's going on now. I'm also a medium, so I can speak to those on the other side. I do animal communication, both living and deceased. I do your regular psychic stuff, past, present, and future. I'm a Reiki Master Teacher, etc. And my gift started really, my first memory of it was at the age of 3. I had some very powerful mediumship experiences where I had memories of actually communicating with those on the other side. And so from then, it just took off. And I had tarot cards and I would read for others. At the age of 8 is when I started reading for other people. But, I basically say I was born this way and this is how I am. And my gifts were just part of me.
Wonderful.
So it's always been with me.
Great. So let me ask you, as a medium, what is your process? How do you connect? How do you start the process of connecting with someone on the other side?
It's very interesting. People have asked me things like that. And sometimes it's really hard to explain what the process is because it just is. It's simply a matter of me clicking a switch, sort of an internal switch. And sometimes that switch is turned on all the time. And sometimes, even walking down the grocery store aisles, I'm picking up on other people's stuff and I don't want to. So it's a matter of clicking the switch off. But it's sort of kind of there. And there, for me, there is no process when it comes to the mediumship. It either is or it isn't.
And do you always connect with the other side, or are there times when, like for instance, people do come to you as a medium to do a reading? Have you ever come across a point or a time when you try to connect and you just can't?
Yeah, there was one time I had a client who wanted to speak to his dad, and his dad just wasn't ready to come through. And I had later read for the same person's nephew, and the quote-unquote dad at the time, who was grandfather to this child, was very happy to come through then. So it's always a matter of when they're ready. And that's been my only time when somebody hasn't come through that they really wanted that person to come through. And it's a matter of choice for them on the other side as well. It's not like I'm waving my magic wand and I'm summoning them up. It's whether they're ready and they want to have that conversation because, they have free will as well. So it is always something that's sort of there. But not everybody comes to me for mediumship also. So right. Whether it's turned on or turned off, that's not necessarily what they want to hear.
Absolutely. And do you think that maybe the other side sometimes they don't want to come through because the person is just in such deep grief that they just feel that they'll keep them in that place?
Yes. Yeah. And that's a very, very good point. That was one of the situations that had happened. In this particular case that I was talking about, the dad had died of a very sad and tragic illness.
Yeah.
And he passed away when the guy I was reading for was a child. And it was something that he had never moved past. And, and when you lose your parent, it is hard to move past something like that. And I can't even begin to understand what that is like. But yes, I do think that that's a very good point, that he had been dwelling on it. And frankly, it had stopped his life from moving on in many different directions. So yes, that's a very good point.
Wonderful. Thank you. So let's talk about your other gifts, elemental energies. What are they and how do you work with them?
So I work with the elementals, and that's why my name is Elemental Energies with Chris Ann.
Right.
So for me, the elementals represent a whole host of things, but for me, it's four specifically. So I deal with the mermaids, I deal with the fairies, I deal with the dragons, and I deal with the unicorns. And when I deal with them, it is for healing purposes. So it can include some communication and things like that, but I mostly tap into the elementals when I'm doing Reiki, for instance, and I have somebody that's on the table that needs deep healing. A lot of times the unicorn will come in, and the unicorn energy is very, very powerful and very, very healing. If somebody has an issue that they need just burned away so that they can move on, their dragon will come in. And the dragon energy is very powerful for helping somebody move past what they need to move past, basically helping them to break from what is not working for them. And the fairies help with your connection with nature and helping to stay grounded. And the mermaids help with the water connection, because the water can be very powerful when it comes to going to the water's edge and just releasing something that's not working for you. The mermaids can come in, the mermaid energy can come in, take that away, and replace it with something much more powerful, wonderful, and loving. So those are sort of a brief, quick way of how I deal with the elementals in my business.
Absolutely. So do you think that...
in my life.
Do you think that the elementals exist on, and I don't even know if I'm going to say this in a correct way, that they exist in another dimension?
Yes.
Or are they in a spirit?
Yes. I say we exist in a realm between realms. So they have their own realms and we have our own realms. And sometimes we're able to cross. And it's kind of nice.
Definitely. Akashic records, the soul's history and past lives. How do you work with them? What is the benefit for you? And what is the benefit of working with others with this gift?
Sure. I love working with the Akashic records. So the Akashic records is something that holds your soul's complete history through all lifetimes, through all dimensions, through all time. So what I will do is I will tap into somebody's Akashic records. So how I do that is I need their full current name, because the power, the vibration of their name helps me to tap into their Akashic records. And then I have a saying that I say to get in, so I call it the key to get into the records. And then at the end, when I'm done the reading, I have a key to close out the records. You always close somebody out. You never leave everybody open, because that's sort of not a good thing. So what I do is I open up somebody's records, and a lot of times they come to me with a specific question. So I can tap into their records and I can see, gee, for instance, you have a current health problem. How did that happen? Is it something that you were born with? Is it something that happened when you were 20? So let's go back and let's look at the Akashic records and let's see why. And a lot of times what I can see is maybe you had a very serious injury in one of your lifetimes, and it may have happened when you were 20 in another lifetime. And that's why it sort of triggered that in this lifetime. So then, utilizing the Reiki, I can go in and I can do some healing on that particular instance in that particular lifetime, so it can help the person in this current lifetime be able to have some relief, be able to break from it, acknowledge it, cut from it, and move on from it. And I use the Akashic records also when I'm doing my mediumship, when I'm doing my animal communication. I utilize all of my gifts. Everything is done through the Akashic records. And I'm able to sort of go through whatever door within the records that I need to go through based on what is best for my client. And a lot of times as soon as I open the Akashic records for my client, that's when the mediumship might click in, because I'll notice their loved ones or their angels, their guides, their whomever, their animals, everybody could be just standing there waiting for me. And sometimes it's as simple as one, or it could be a room full. So it just depends. It depends on what the person needs. And I always listen to my guides and their guides, because what they are verbally telling me they need might not be the full necessarily what they actually need. So I'm also listening to what their guides, etc., are saying on the other side, because they're kind of filling in the blanks. So that's how I kind of do things. And, that's kind of my way of using the Akashic Records. It's not necessarily the traditional way, but it's how I do it. And it's what works for me.
How much access do you have to the Akashic Records? In other words, is there a certain limit of how far back you can go?
No, there isn't.
There is no limit. Do you normally know how many lives a person has lived when you look at them or when you dig in?
Only if they ask me. And not many people ask me.
Wow, that's very interesting. Yeah.
I know. Right. And most times people come to me kind of in crisis mode.
Oh, yeah.
They might have a very pressing, in the moment issue. So we need to deal with that. And then we can follow up with the other things maybe in another session. But normally people come to me dealing with an issue in the moment.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question on the Akashic Records. Now, all the lives that you review for a human, are all lives they have lived in human form, or are some of them in animal? No? Wow.
No, they are not. And you know what? I've heard so many varied opinions on this. And you know what? Everybody's entitled to their opinion, and that's fantastic. What I have seen is it is not always human form. Like, for instance, during the time of Atlantis, you could have been in a mermaid form. And then that is why you have a lot of mermaid energy within this lifetime. And then sometimes I will say to people, geez, you got that bird that keeps coming out behind your kitchen window. Pay attention to that bird, because that bird is your grandfather. And that bird has a specific shortened lifespan. So the grandfather may have chosen to come through using that bird as his vessel because it was just a quick little short lifetime, whereas a human lifetime is much more drawn out. Now, granted, some birds have longer lifetimes than others, but in this particular case that I'm thinking of, it was a shortened life that the grandfather just wanted to come in because the person just sort of wasn't hearing it, wasn't getting it. So the grandfather came through as this bird to have the person just sort of see the synchronicities and just sort of help them to get it. And when I pointed it out, they got it. And it made sense.
Yeah. You are also an animal communicator, and you communicate with them whether they're living or deceased. How do you communicate with them? How do you hear them? What do they say?
It's sometimes, it's varied actually, which is really kind of fun for me because nothing is ever the same. It could be our kind of way of communicating, that I am hearing them in that sort of tones and ways and words, but it also can be communicating through images. So I have all the different, I call them all the clairs, clairaudient, clairsentient, etc. So it means I can see, taste, smell, etc. So a lot of times the animals might give me a scent. They might give me a picture. They might give me impression. I might get a feeling of love or a feeling of hatred. And they might show me a picture. So sometimes it can be, they just don't like that new food that you're giving them. And you know what? It's hurting their teeth and they're having a gum problem because my jaw's starting to hurt me. So, I might feel it within my body. And it might be something as quick as a second. And I'm feeling it within me, and I'm seeing these images, and I'm getting these feelings. So I just sort of put it all together within an instant. So it's always varied. It depends on the type of animal. It depends on the soul, how they want to communicate with me, and how they're able to communicate with me. So it's just like people. It's always different for everybody.
Right. Do you detect the certain levels of mentality, or are there levels of mentality depending on the animal?
There are, and it's the same thing with people too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, you're right. Absolutely, you are right.
There are, yeah, and I am able to sort of detect who's a little more psychic, shall we say, whereas in this life they may not have been viewed as overly intelligent, but in actuality they're really picking up much more other sensory things than anybody has ever given them credit for.
Do you communicate with all types of animals once they have crossed over? Do they have an opportunity to come back in another form?
Mm-hmm. They do. Yep. It's much like people. It's the soul's choice. The soul always makes the decision before it comes through. So for a human, we can choose who our parents will be. So it's much like for an animal. What lesson do you want to learn in this lifetime? And how is it best that you can learn that lesson and achieve that particular goal? So is that goal best achieved as being a bird? Is that goal best achieved as being a human? You make that decision on a soul level before you come in.
Right. Do you consider yourself mostly psychic or medium?
It depends on the moment.
Depends on the moment.
I'm a psychic medium. That's just
Got
kind
it.
of how I say it. I consider myself just me. It's hard for me to put a label on what it is I do because I do so many varied things that it happens to click in different for every client depending on what their needs may be.
Absolutely, yeah. And I do believe that also, that many times when clients come in for a reading, sometimes what they want is not exactly what they get because it's not what they need.
Exactly.
Crystal communications.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a lot of my work, my Reiki work, I use crystals because just like you were saying, if somebody is coming to me and they're telling me that they need Reiki and geez, I'm having this stomach problem and I don't know what's going on, this stomach problem's going on, and I get in there and I see that the emotional has led to the physical. And the emotional is just too much for them to deal with right now. It's just too much for them to bear. I put my client in a crystal grid. So I use crystals all around the client, on the client, under the table. There's crystals everywhere. And I'm using the energy of the crystal to help communicate with them. So I call it crystal communication. That's sort of my thing, because I communicate on so many levels with so many different things that communication just seemed to fit for me. So that was my title that I came up with. And, the crystals are communicating with the soul, with the body, with the person to help for their highest and best good. And it might not be something that they actually acknowledge that they need, but the crystals are getting in and doing some heavy duty work for them.
Very interesting. What is Lemurian energy and how do you work with it?
Lemurian crystal is a very powerful crystal. So it looks very similar to a clear quartz, but it has natural horizontal striations going across the different faces of the crystal. And Lemurian crystals are an extremely high vibrational crystal. And I like to work with different vibrations. So the higher the vibration, the more I like it, the more I'm drawn to it. Mm-hmm. So a Lemurian crystal is said that these were the crystals that were left here during the time of Atlantis, Mu, and Lemuria. And these crystals were left here during those times of this planet for us to utilize now during this time of the planet. And these were left here from the healers of then to use as the healers now to help raise the vibration of the souls that are here, to help raise the vibration of the planet. So the Lemurian crystal is a very, very powerful crystal that I can do an entire session if I only have that crystal. Or I can put somebody in a grid of multiples of a Lemurian crystal. And I have my primary Lemurian crystal is the size of a wand, so I can hold it in my hand as a large one. And then I have smaller ones that I can use that I put around the body, and they have natural points to them. So whether I want the energy to go in the body, I point the points in. Or if I want the energy to be released from the body, I turn the crystals around and I point the points out. And I can be switching the points around during a session. So I don't always leave the crystals in one position, and I don't always leave the same crystals. So I can be switching up that grid multiple times during a session. So Lemurian healing is done with the help of the unicorn energy, because that is a high vibration energy, and it is very similar to the actual Lemurian crystal energy as well. It is a very gentle, higher vibration that just kind of works its way in like a nice soft blanket. And it's a very gentle but effective way of doing a healing. If you only can choose one crystal, then choose a Lemurian. And I'm lucky enough that I studied with Diana Cooper, and she's out of England, and I studied with her on how to do some Lemurian healing using the Lemurian crystal. And so that's where I studied with that, and I'm very lucky to have learned that from her. And it's a very effective way of some gentle healing. And it just depends on what the person needs as to what type of healing I'm going to do for them.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I think I just noticed that as we're talking about this, I Googled it. I walk around with a crystal. It's a quartz that I always walk around in my pocket. I think it's a Lemurian crystal because it looks...
Oh, cool. Does it have those natural striations going across naturally?
Yes, it does.
Well, you are very lucky, because it's hard to get a true Lemurian. And I tell people, if you're going to go out and get Lemurians, make sure you're getting it from a reputable person. And I always say douse it with your pendulum, or however you douse, or whatever works for you. Douse it to double check that it's Lemurian, because there's a lot of people saying things are Lemurians. But a true Lemurian will have a nice, high, gentle vibration to it.
Are these particular crystals to help with different issues, or simply increase protection, abundance, or healing?
I like to use the Lemurians for healing. For protection, I like something else. And abundance, it can be used for abundance. And I always say, if you want to bring in abundance, you carry it on your left-hand side in the pocket, or your pocketbook if you always carry it on that side. Whatever you can do to always get it on your left. Like attracts like. So if you like that higher vibration, carry it with you so you will attract the abundance of those like-minded people around you, and that wonderful healing energy also. But I specifically use it for healing. But you can certainly use it for other things. And I wear them as jewelry because I love the vibration and I love the energy.
I love crystals too. I'm very attracted to them. Where can the listeners go to learn more about crystals and their influences on us and our energy fields?
Sure. I think there's some great books out there, and I have an iPhone, so I downloaded a lot of the iPhone apps that I think are fantastic, and all you got to do is just put in crystals and you'll get some wonderful apps. It's great to kind of carry the apps with you if you're going into the crystal store, so you know which one is which when you want to buy it. But also, you can also go to my Facebook page, Elemental Energies with Chrisanne. I do a crystal of the day. So I'm always talking about different crystals. And, I would say take a crystal class. I teach a ton of classes. I teach crystal gridding, and I'm now starting to teach through Skype. So anybody can take a class with me from all over the world. So, feel free to get in touch with me as well. But, there's plenty of local people. Just go into a crystal store and ask, or a metaphysical store, and ask if they offer any classes, and go with what feels right for you.
Now, if someone was interested in taking a class in crystals with you, where is the schedule and how can they get a hold of you or information about you?
Sure. I'm working on the schedule. It's not officially posted yet, and I'm working on a website. But what I tell people is to go to my Facebook page, which is Elemental Energies with Chrisanne, because everything is going to be posted there. I'm in the process of putting together a metaphysical center and a healing center. So that will be done and open by next month. So that's going to be in Wells, Maine. So anybody local can come in to that. But for right now, I would say you can either go to Facebook, Elemental Energies with Chrisanne, or you're always welcome to email me. And that's creations, with an S, creations by Chrisanne @gmail.com.
You're also a multimedia artist and instructor. How do you describe what you do, and how do you teach it?
Well, everything with me is vibration and intuition. So I'm lucky that I have a plethora of stuff in my art studio, aka junk.
Oh.
I'm lucky
Okay.
that I have paper scraps and fibers and paints and, I have collected so much, we'll just call it stuff, over the years.
Okay.
And, I like to rubber stamp things and I like to paint things. And it's whatever I'm guided to do. And, whatever is sort of needed. I have a meditation CD coming out in a couple of weeks. So I've been busy painting all my cover art for that. So it's whatever is needed. And I like to work with everything. That's the problem.
Well, that's
and
wonderful.
and
Yeah.
I like to work with children when it comes to doing art. And one of my favorite classes to teach kids is how to paint with everything but a paintbrush. And I call it a not a paintbrush class.
Really?
So we can paint with our fingers, we can paint with the end of a pencil, we can paint with a Q-tip. Think of what you have around the house that you can utilize as a not a paintbrush. And, you start seeing the world in a different place. And, everything is art. And art is so subjective, and it's what you like, and it's what makes you happy. And it's really good to have pieces around you that make you happy. And that's what I like to instill in the children, because then they're able to create something and give it as a gift and make somebody else happy. So it's such a circle of happiness that I like to instill in kids and, of course, adults as well.
What is dichroic jewelry?
Dichroic jewelry is fused glass that I make in my kiln. So what I do is there is a specific type of glass that's called dichroic glass. And dichroic glass is a metal coating to the glass that was actually started as technology used by NASA on the space shuttle. And dichroic glass has that metal coating that can withstand extremely high temperatures. So within my glass, I incorporate it with my fused glass. So dichroic is just the really shimmery, really sparkly type of glass that I add. For me, it's into jewelry, and I add to my jewelry. And so what I'm doing is I like to change the vibration of everything I do. So I'm Reikiing it as I'm cutting it, Reikiing it as it goes into the kiln. I cook it at 1,586 degrees. So I'm also kind of a bit of an alchemist, that I take a solid, I turn it into a liquid, and I get a different solid at the end, which is really fun. And then after it cools and anneals for like a day, I take it out and I Reiki it again. And, while I'm turning it into jewelry, I'm Reikiing it again. And dichroic glass, all glass, but dichroic glass especially, has the ability to hold that vibration. So whatever vibration I put into it, whether it be a healing vibration, a vibration to connect with your guides, I can put that vibration into the glass. And then I turn around and sell my jewelry. But I can also change the vibration. If somebody needs it to do something else, I can change it to do that. And I also use these pieces in my Reiki work. Instead of crystals, I have some dichroic pieces that I simply lay on the body, maybe at different chakra points or wherever it is needed. So the dichroic glass is wonderful for holding different vibrations that I need it to hold, that I program it to do.
What is the difference between putting a different vibration and or intention? What's the difference between vibration and intention in your thoughts?
That's a good question, because to me, it's actually very similar. It's of the same thing. My intention is to give that vibration to the jewelry or to the person or to the crystal. And with my intention, we'll just say, we'll use the example of healing. With my intention of having somebody have healing, I can give that vibration to it, so it raises somebody's vibration.
You mentioned that you empower your pieces with healing and calming energy. Is this like feng shui when someone does feng shui to a room?
Well, I'm not really an expert in feng shui, so it is setting it is programming it to do what it needs to do. So by putting my intention into it, by putting my Reiki energy into it, by infusing it with that energy, it can maintain that energy, but somebody else can come along and change it if they choose to. If somebody wants to come along and Reiki it and tweak it a little bit for something else, they absolutely can. But I'm doing it through Reiki, and I am giving it a specific thing to do and a specific goal to work within the energy of that person.
Interesting. In everything that you do with your art and whatnot, crystals and do you use certain colors, images, or shapes for a specific purpose when you create them? Is it a message that comes with them for the people to interpret in their own way?
Yeah, I like to do a lot of chakra things. So I will do a lot of the chakra colors within, like I make a lot of crystal grids, and those I'll either paint or spray paint different crystal grids. And that is for a really high intention that somebody can have a healing on a full body experience. So depending on the colors, for me, I correlate the colors with chakras. And I want that color related to that chakra to help that person within that way.
Is it with the primary chakras that you're working with, the primary 7?
It is. It is. And I see them a smidge bit differently than other people see them. So starting at the base chakra and working up, I see red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, and white. So that is how I create the majority of my things, using those colors. I don't see the double blue. I see the blue, purple, white at the end, at the top. And, when I want somebody to go even higher beyond that, I am using whites infused with silvers and golds and even more really powerful whites beyond, because I also work with the 21 chakras above the head as well. So yeah, I work within all of it, and it's great. And you had asked about the shapes and the symbols, and I do use specific shapes and symbols when it comes to the shape of the crystal I'm using, but also how I'm placing the crystals within the crystal grid. I am creating specific shapes within the crystals, within the gridding, on the person, around the person, on my portable crystal grid. I might be using, I like things in threes, so I do a lot of sort of triangle shaped things. Or I'll do sets of 4s, but I work within, like the Metatron cubes and those sort of sacred, I use a lot of sacred geometry. So yeah. I use those imagery as well, but I'm using my sacred geometry when it comes to the placing of the crystals, the amount of the crystals. And that is encompassing the body within that vibration and within that sort of force field, that little cocoon of energy that I need it to be in.
Why 3s and 4s when you work in?
That's what resonates with me.
Interesting. Okay.
That's me. And sometimes I'll do 7s or 8s or 9s, but it's also what I'm picking up from the person too. If I'm hearing do 3 Herkimer diamonds and 9 rose quartz, then that's what I'm going to do. I just do what I'm guided to do.
That's an awesome answer, and I definitely agree with that 100%. The other thing I was reading about you is you do gallery readings. Explain what a gallery reading is, and apart from giving messages to the group, what's the other benefits or other benefit that you can give to people with this type of reading?
Sure. Well, there are traditional gallery readings, and traditional gallery readings are a group, and it can be as small as 3 and 4 people, or it could be as much as thousands of people. And a gallery reading is the psychic or psychic medium will stand in the front of the room, and they will sort of get a message, and they will say, gee, I'm feeling the information of so-and-so, and this is what they feel like, and I'm kind of drawn to this person over here, you, and sort of this is the message that I'm getting. I don't do traditional gallery readings. I do gallery readings / healings. And I like to do smaller ones. So mine will go up to 100 people because I am doing gallery readings / vibrational healings. So yes, I do get the traditional messages. Yes, I'm guided to certain people. But what I also do is I love to bring my instruments. So I have a Native American drum that I made. I have a glass pyramid that I love to use. I have a whole bunch of Tibetan singing bowls that I like to use. And what I'll do is Yes, and getting the information that their father passed away and it wasn't a good situation, let's just say.
Mm.
And it's very emotional. These are always very emotional events. So then what I can come in and do for that person, maybe after I've given the message or as I'm giving the message, I can come in with my instruments and I can be doing a healing on that person in the moment to help them release, whether it's the negative energies or embrace the positive energies of that person that has come through for them. And a lot of times people come in and they want to speak to somebody specific. And it's really hard to do that in a gallery reading. A gallery reading it's just what it is that's coming to me or this any of the psychics that are doing it. It's whatever information is coming in, that's the information you're going to get. It is not like a one-on-one session where you get to ask specific questions and that whole half hour, hour and a half, whatever it might be, is simply devoted to you and those issues. That is not what it is in a gallery reading. A gallery reading is something that I like to say is a little bit more affordable for people to go and experience a psychic. And it's a little more fun, but they're always emotional. So it's, you get a something, and not everybody gets a something with the other psychics. I like to give a something to everybody. That's why I like to work with smaller audiences so that everybody can get something, because I've been to psychic mediums and their gallery readings and I've gotten nothing. And I understand that feeling. So that's why I like smaller events, because then everybody's able to get at least a sentence, a something, an energy from me, a something. And that's how I like to work.
Absolutely. Now, what type of validation do you get when you work as a psychic? As a medium. And what I mean by that, do names come across often, or what other type of validation do you get?
Well, first of all, I don't require any validation from the person that I'm working with, because to me, that's my ego that's being stroked, and I don't need my ego stroked.
Okay.
So what I will say to the person is, listen, this is the information. It's rhetorical. If you don't want to comment, that's fine. But I always tell my clients up front, if what I am saying does not make sense to you or you have a question about it, tell me, because then we can move on from there. But it doesn't really happen. I don't get a lot of names. And I say that because I do my readings in the Akashic Records, time does not exist in the Akashic Records. It is timeless. So I always say, don't ask me to find anything, because I can't even find my own things.
Okay.
I don't get specific names. I will get like a sound or something like that. And I don't do time frames carved in stone, because the future is always changing. I can get a feeling for when it was and what lifetime you were in, because I'm seeing the clothing and, I can see the technology or lack thereof in the past or in the future. So I don't do like, gee, when am I going to get a wife?
Right.
I can't give you that specific time frame. I can tell you on mediumship level wise, if somebody's coming through, I can say there's a very grandmother energy to this person. So they could either be your grandmother, they could be your great aunt, they could be somebody like that. And then what I do is I go and describe the personality. I don't really do a lot of names. Others do, and that's phenomenal for them, but that's not how I work.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. I never thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
This is Tony Valen, host of Healing from Within. You can contact me, Tony at TonyValen.com, or visit our website, healingfromwithin.net. Follow the show on Twitter at TVHFW. The show is also available on iTunes and YouTube. Just search Healing from Within with Tony Valen, or look for the Tony Valen channel on YouTube. We're talking to our guest, Chris Ann. She's a psychic medium, Reiki Master Teacher, and artist. You can learn more about Chris Ann by going to creationsbychrisann.etsy.com. Like Chris Ann on Facebook, go to Facebook, search Elemental Energies with Chris Ann. Follow Chris Ann on Twitter at ChrisAnn1234. Chris Ann, let's talk a little more about your journey and where you are now. In an article that you wrote for the spring edition of Inter Tapestry Journal titled To See or Not to See, you talked about your journey. You come from an Armenian background. Tell us a little about your family and about the ghost gossip and the psychic scoop that was in the kitchen.
Well, being Armenian, I'm very lucky that my Armenian side of the family is very gifted as well. The majority of my relatives were very, very psychic and very gifted. And I think most people are, but my Armenian side of the family was just very dialed into it. But I have to say, I'm the only one that's using it as a profession. So, growing up, it was not uncommon to get together with the women in the kitchen, and they'd be talking about this experience or that experience. And that was very sort of normal and common for me to grow up with. And I remember when I was a teenager and my grandfather passed away. At the funeral, my cousins were all coming up to me and they're like, oh, what message did you get from him when he crossed over? Well, I got this message. What message did you get? And, it was a very unique experience. And, I realized, even as a child, this isn't exactly what everybody else talks about in the kitchen. And this isn't exactly what all funerals are like for other people. So I'm lucky that it was very embraced within my culture and within my growing up. Now, not all Armenian families are that way. Let me just preface that. Mm-hmm. But my Armenian side of the family, both my grandmother and grandfather, my mom is pure Armenian, full-blooded Armenian. So both her parents were Armenian. So within both of those sides of the family, I'm very lucky that it was very, very embraced. And it was very talked about that, the things that go bump in the night were just sort of commonplace for us.
Interesting. Do you remember any of the stories, the ghost gossip or the psychic scoop that your family used to talk about? I know you were a child back then, but
Sure. No, I remember.
I remember.
Wow. I do. I remember. I was very, very young when this one, and my brother is 4 years younger than me. So this story was about me before my brother was born. That's how I remember. And I remember my mom was talking about it, and I was about 4 at the time that she was talking about it. And this had happened when I was about 3, that my father had made this carved wooden shelf that was in my bedroom. And my mom had made me an Easter basket that fit perfectly on this shelf. There was no wiggle room. It was just this Easter basket fit right there. It was like a box. It fit right onto this shelf. And my mom was saying, I can't believe it. It was so high up and she was in her crib. And then I go in to wake her up from her nap. And there's the basket all over the floor. And so my mom was seeing a psychic at the time, and my mom had gone to the psychic. And, my mom's telling this to all my aunts and cousins and grandmother and everybody. And the psychic's like, well, because it was candy that was in the basket, it was something that was sweet. It's a positive thing. So she was saying your daughter is surrounded by positive energy, and it's a really good thing. Because my mother was like, there's no way this basket could have fallen. And,
right.
And I always thought, I'm really kind of lucky.
Yeah.
So, I remember that one.
Interesting. You tell us about your uncle being your teacher and later mentioned that he was your spirit guide. Was your uncle teaching you from spirit world or also from physical world?
No, I never met him in physical.
Okay.
He only came to me in spirit, and he is who I remember from the age of 3 on. So my first medium experiences were with him. And in life, he was very gifted at astral projection. And he had so many gifts that he was able to utilize in life that when he crossed over, he became one of my primary guides. And that's what he was teaching me at the age of 3. So I'm very, very lucky because he was extremely gifted here. And then when he crossed over, he part of his job on the other side is to help educate those that have crossed over. And he is a big teacher over there as well as he was for me here.
What do you think was the most valuable lesson your uncle taught you?
Astral projection. I'm very lucky he taught me how to astral project. And what astral projection is the ability to leave your body and go wherever you would like. He went far further than I choose to. But I'm very happy that he taught me that, because later in life, I have a chronic illness. So I'm in a lot of pain, but I don't take any pain meds. I just pop out of my body every once in a while.
Mm.
But tell that one to your doctors.
Well, and I was going to say, are you still having those issues and you still use astral projection?
I use it almost every day.
Wow, interesting. Your grandmother was also a teacher of yours, teaching you to read faces. Explain how that process is, how it helps others. She taught you how to see inside people. Was that like a medical intuitive? Please explain.
Well, she wasn't necessarily teaching me using it for medical. She was mostly teaching it for me to learn how to gauge people and who was in the highest and best good for me to be around. So she was mostly teaching it to me to use for understanding personality traits and who it was okay for me to trust and not trust. My grandmother was a very traditional Armenian woman, and she was married through an arranged marriage. She didn't really have a lot to say in her life, but she was very gifted when it came to judging people, and that's what she passed on to me. And it wasn't that she was making judgments upon them. That was never it. It was she was able to utilize what was this person's motive, what was their highest and best good. So, I was able to read people based on, maybe it's like physical characteristics, that is this person telling the truth? Or is this person deceiving in another way? And, is this the best person to be around? But later on, it became useful for me to use it for a little bit of medical intuitiveness. I don't say I'm a medical intuitive because there's a whole other expectation that goes along with that. But I do a lot of medical intuitive things. But I'm mostly seeing colors when I'm doing it, or my eyes are drawn to a specific area in somebody's body, and my eyes will just go to that particular stomach, ear, eye, head, whatever it is. My eyes just go, and it happens within a second. So some of that was based on what my grandmother was helping me to learn, and helping me to learn energies and to be within my best energy that I could possibly be.
Right. And when you see people and you're drawn to certain problem areas, for lack of a better word, is it the color that you see or you feel, or altogether the same?
It's everything.
Everything.
It's everything. Because for instance, if I have somebody on a Reiki table, I might, if I step up to the table, I could be feeling a little bit of stomach issues going on with me that I know is not me. But if I have somebody in front of me for a reading, it's wherever my eye goes. That, boom, my eye just goes there. And if I miss it, I miss it. I have to pay attention. I have to constantly be on to know, okay. And I'll say to the person, okay, what do you have going on with your ear? And it could be they've got an ear infection going on that they're just ignoring and they need to not ignore it.
Yeah.
It's that type of thing. It's wherever my eye goes.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And I definitely feel that, there's sometimes whenever, actually, just like you, I'm walking around minding my own business, and I'll detect and feel things from other people or people around them that are, in spirit world, and I'll feel short of breath, or I'll feel anxious or something, and it's just so strange. But so I get it. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's a gift. It's a lovely gift, but it can be tiring after a while, and I'm sure you know that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned that conventional school wasn't for you, and from my conversation with other psychics and mediums, it seems like that is always the case. You used to astral project during class. How would you do this? I mean, like you're a child, you're in public, you're having this lady talking or doing whatever they do, teachers, to us.
Right.
How did you do that? Was it easy?
For me, it is. I can remember being in kindergarten, being 5 years old, and the teacher would say to my mom, she's such a daydreamer. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm popping out because you're boring me to death.
Yeah. Exactly.
it's just something I just do. So whenever I hear that there's a kid that's a daydreamer, it's like, yeah, I know what's going on
Yeah.
there.
You're checking out. You're checking out.
Right. And schools, when I went to school 50 gazillion years ago, schools were more auditory than they were visual. And I think, why I'm so drawn to my visual art, because everything I do, I use bold colors. I like strong visual imagery because I want the children, the adults, I want people engaged in the visual, because we don't do so much visual when it comes to our education. Unfortunately, we live in a society where other things are very visual, but I want the pleasing aesthetics, the positive things, to be very, very visual and very, very effective, because that's how I needed to learn. And in fact, I became a sign language interpreter. So how much more visual can you get
Yeah,
than a
exactly.
visual form of communication? And I realized that when I was working I used to work in a middle school, that when I was speaking to my deaf students, and explaining it in sign language, what the lesson was, I was interpreting what the lesson was.
Mm-hmm.
The hearing students were getting it on a different level because I was their visual. I was the visual that they needed. And I think we just need so much more visual within our educational system, within life.
Yeah, because that engages people or keeps people engaged. I agree with you.
Right.
Did you read your teachers' energies and and things that were going on with them, and did you mention it to them, and how did they take that, if you did?
I read it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But I have always been the type that will never go up to anybody unless I am asked. Then and now. If I see somebody is having a horrible time and like passing them by in the grocery store and I see something's going on, I will not go up to them and say, oh, so-and-so has a message for you and this is what it is. No. The only thing I'll do is I'll say hi, I'll give them a smile, and, I just kind of send them some good energy or, that type of thing. But I will not go up and say anything. And I always say, if you need the message to get to that person, you bring that person to my office, because I am not the type that will just go up to somebody in public because they may not be ready to hear it. Just because their crossed over loved one is ready to say it doesn't mean that the living person is ready to hear it. So I always say, bring them to my office. You guide them to me. You get them to me any way you need to. That's the only way I'm going to chat with them, because I just think that's such an invasion of privacy.
Yeah, I agree. It's very disrespectful, in my
It's
opinion.
upsetting.
Yeah.
It's off-putting for the living person to be like, what? What are you talking about? And yeah, I agree. But I understand there are people that do that. And you know what? I respect them. People work in different ways than I do. And I absolutely can respect that. But that is not how I work.
Yeah, I agree. Do you agree with giving the message despite what it is?
Yes,
because sometimes
absolutely.
So yeah. Okay, good.
Right. And because what might seem horrible and horrendous to me, like, for instance, I could tell somebody, I'm sorry, but you're going to be getting a divorce. That might seem like a terrible thing, but to them, they're like, yay, hallelujah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is not for
You
me
never
to
know.
interpret. Right.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I agree with that.
Right.
Now, it seems like I was reading information on you, and it seems like at a very early age of 20, you developed a chronic disease. Can you tell us about the event and your thoughts on what happened?
Sure. Well, like I was saying earlier, I'm a sign language interpreter. And I kept getting messages that, I'm working too much, I'm working too much, I'm working too much. But I had no choice. That was what my job was. So I had an overuse repetitive motion injury to my bilateral upper extremities spreading to my bilateral lower extremities, meaning I had overused my arms and my legs because I used to do a lot of walking within my work. I was shadowing whomever I was interpreting for. So I was working in the school system, and earlier I had worked in the like at the State House and government. I had done a lot of political interpreting. I did a lot of theater, different settings. But this particular thing had happened after I had worked in the educational setting. And there's a very heavy workload in the educational setting. So I developed an overuse injury, and I was no longer able to work, and I was no longer able to do that. And it was a very, very painful time in my life, both physically and emotionally. So that's where the astral projection came in great. And
Right.
then soon after that, I started going to a Reiki practitioner, and I started learning yoga, and I started doing Tai Chi. And then I became a Reiki practitioner because of that. So that kind of kicked me in the butt to learn all this other stuff that I needed to accompany my already present gifts.
Absolutely. So you think this was just a way to get you to the correct path, or the
Right.
true path that you were supposed to follow? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tell us, what is the difference between indigo children and crystal children?
Sure. I love that. People ask me that all the time too. So the difference is when you were born. So the children that are being born now, from now back maybe like 10, 15 years, those are crystal children. People that are my age or younger, and I was one of the earlier indigos, those are indigo children. So the indigos were here to pave the way for the crystal children. So the indigo children were the people that thought outside the box. The indigos were the people that stood up to, those in power, quote unquote, and said no. Those were the people that really started paving the way to make a difference and started saying, hey, people, this isn't working. Hey, people, we need to start doing things a different way. And that's sort of what the primary goal, as I see it, is what an indigo was. And these were very gifted. These were very in tuned. These were very psychic people. Because when the crystal children came in, so the indigos also were trying to raise the vibration of the people of the planet. So when the crystal children came in, these kids were on an extremely high vibrational level. So a lot of these kids didn't resonate with what was going on here. So many times, not always, but many times, these are the kids that are on the spectrum. So they could have autism, they could have Asperger's, they could have ADHD. They just resonate on a different level. Super intuitive kids, super smart, super gifted. These are the kids that are the gifted healers without being taught how to be a healer. These are the kids that just gravitate towards each other. And these are the kids that have communication without any verbal communication. These are the kids that are finding the crystals, that are doing some amazing work. These are the kids that are going to make a big difference here on this planet, because it's what the planet needs. It's time for these kids to be acknowledged for the wonderful gift that they are.
Chris-Anne, I want to thank you so much for sharing your work, your life, and your experiences with us.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very honored to have been here with you. Thank you.
Our thanks to Chris-Anne. She is a psychic medium, Reiki Master Teacher, and artist. You can learn more about Chris-Anne by going to creationsbychrisanne.etsy.com. Like Chris-Anne on Facebook, go to Facebook, search Elemental Energies with Chris-Anne. Follow Chris-Anne on Twitter at Chris-Anne1234. You are listening to Healing from Within with Tony Valen here on Blog Talk Radio as a pre-recorded show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Central. Visit our website, healingfromwithin.net. Contact me directly, Tony at TonyValen.com. Please follow the show on Twitter at TVHFW. The show is also available on iTunes and YouTube. Just search Healing from Within with Tony Valen or look for the Tony Valen channel on YouTube. Thank you so much. Love and light from all of us here at Healing from Within.